Stop right there. If you think this is a breakdown video on a player that I only heard about 12 hours ago, it's not. I'm not going to do some big breakdown right here, maybe in the future, on Rodrigo Mendoza, the Elche midfielder, 20-year-old Spanish youngster that Arsenal are reportedly looking to sign, according to Sam Dean of The Telegraph. But I do think we've got a lot of clues as to why Arsenal want to sign this type of player. With a little bit of basic research, looking at the style of player he is, I think we can actually really look at this and come to some pretty good conclusions about what Arsenal are trying to do with the future of their midfield. Because we've tried to sign this kind of player before, and we're doing something very unique with the current use of our midfielders. Only yesterday, 2 days ago, we dropped a video on the Goonerverse analysing the win against Tottenham, and we talked about Zubimendi and Declan Rice both storming the penalty area 30 seconds into the second half against Tottenham with a 2-0 lead. Some might think that's brave, some might think that's stupid, but ultimately it was the runners from midfield that gave Arsenal the impetus to go get so many goals that caused Tottenham problems time and time again. And I think it's shown an evolution of the midfield roles that Arteta wants this season. We have looked at this type of player before. We didn't get them. They ended up somewhere else. We'll talk about that player in a sec. And now we're here supposedly looking at another. And then there's Andrea Berta to talk about as well. So what do we know about the move? Let's talk about that firstly. And then I'll explain why I think Arsenal are trying to sign Rodrigo Mendoza and what he could bring to Arsenal's midfield that is different to what we already have. Even at just some surface level analysis, there's something quite interesting in the player. So let's go through what we know. According to Sam Dean in The Telegraph, Arsenal are closely monitoring Rodrigo Mendoza, 20 years old, and are weighing up a potential move. The player, who has a release clause of 20 million euros, is more likely to leave Elche next summer than in the January transfer window, although a winter move cannot be ruled out. So, I think we said yesterday, because I touched on this very briefly in yesterday's video when I talked about Chelsea and them destroying Barcelona and the results in the Champions League. And we said, who could those other European giants be that are referenced? I mean, Real Madrid, Barcelona, whenever there's a young Spanish player, having an impact, being talked about, they're always at the very front of the queue. Here at Arsenal, a part of the conversation. Now, I always think when transfers are brewing, certain people get hold of certain information and you start to take notice. So, for example, when it makes its way through less reputable sources, I'm inclined to go, okay, this is just a player we're interested in. There's not really much to talk about here. But when it comes through The Telegraph, I start to think, okay, there's definitely something in this, in my opinion. It's got the retweet from Hand of Arsenal, which makes me think, okay, there's probably some weight to it. So, 20 years old, release clause of 20 million euros. I think that's one of the first things we should talk about when we're answering the question, why do Arsenal want to sign this player? Look at Christian Mosquera. I think Andrea Berta has already shown, and if I'm not mistaken, was quite renowned for this at Atletico Madrid. I think he's already shown that he knows the top leagues very well. He knows La Liga incredibly well. I think there's every chance that he looks at potential bargains, potential deals when it comes to contracts expiring, release clauses, and is able to basically go, you know what, there's value in that player. Whether he's absolutely right for where Arsenal want to be. By the way, Christian Mosquera absolutely looks mustard, doesn't he? He looks absolutely right for the level that we want to be at. Looks perfect cover for William Saliba. But I think there's an element of looking at the market and going, there's opportunities here. Even if this player isn't necessarily the answer for our future, maybe comes in at, okay, so what's 20 million euros? We're looking at 16, 17 million pounds. Plays a handful of games, goes on loan, maybe goes for 30, 35 million. It wouldn't surprise me if Arsenal look at those kind of deals, and Andrea Berta is someone who is trying to look for those opportunities, uses connections in Spanish football, having been with Atletico Madrid for so long, and is thinking, we can benefit from this, if not on the pitch, then maybe in terms of the transfer market in general and financially. And I do think that's something Arsenal could do better. I don't want them hoarding players. I don't want them doing exactly what Chelsea do. Don't get me wrong. It's reaped some rewards for them. But I don't want hoarding of talent. I don't want loads of youngsters and young players coming in with loads of promise and it basically not working out for 80% of them. I'm not saying that's what Chelsea have done. I'm saying that's not what I want Arsenal to do. But look at what Chelsea did with a Noni Madueke. Now, okay, look, he's with us and he looks brilliant. So they might rue and regret that sale. But bringing players in at 20-something million, selling them for £50 million, again, I don't want us selling our best players. I don't want us signing good players and selling them. But that's quite a clever use of the market in a different way. Liverpool may be a better example. The level of transfer fee that they are getting for players like Ben Gannon-Doak or Jarrell Quansah. I think Arsenal can do a little bit more of that, but you've got to have the assets to sell. So again, this might sound a bit strange. I'm not saying go sign players just to sell them. I'm saying look at market opportunities, look at where there's really, really good value, and see if there's maybe business that you can do in future with those players if it doesn't quite work out that they're at the level you want for the first team. For what it's worth, I don't think that's exactly what this transfer is all about. I don't think Arsenal are just looking to, plan a future sale with this one. But I think it's just like another layer of opportunity because of the transfer fee for that player. When you're talking about a 20-year-old young Spanish midfielder who's making a massive impact, you're talking 40, 50 million pound transfer fee from the off. I mean, look at the money that's been spent on João Neves or Vitinha when they've moved to PSG, for example. So just one element that I think is worth talking about. But I think there's a bigger point here. Remember I talked about a player who moved, we thought we were going to get, he went somewhere else. That club is Man City. That player is Fer Nipan. Now, look, he was having a major impact in Norwegian football. I think he's still 17 years old maybe. And from a glance, and it is a glance, this is not, like I said, a full scout report and breakdown on a player. He's someone who is a central midfielder who can operate in higher areas and make things happen. He is profile-wise and I want to be really careful how I say this, but to be fair, I think someone said it in the comment section of my video yesterday, so I don't feel too guilty saying it. Central midfielders like Thiago, Iniesta, Xavi, obviously this is an elite level of football I'm talking about, but players who had 10 tendencies, and what I mean by that is number 10 abilities and attributes, could thread passes and beyond, could through balls, could little chip balls into the corner, could make things happen from a creative perspective in the final third, but could also play deep in build-up, who wanted to operate in central spaces, who wanted to control a game of football. Santi Cazorla, a very good example of it at Arsenal. Fabregas as well. Players like that, I don't think Arsenal have had for a very, very, very long time. I think Ødegaard's the closest to it, which is why I always push that Ødegaard is an advanced 8, not really a 10. He's someone who can operate in the 10 space and make things happen, but you can also drop into midfield and alternate and make things happen. I say drop deeper in midfield. Now, I wonder whether Arsenal and Mikel Arteta have been looking for this profile of midfielder for a long, long time. Now, people might say, well, you got Miles Lewis-Skelly, and like I just said, Ødegaard can do that. But I think when you look at Arsenal's midfield, you can actually see that might be the one area where we're slightly missing a little bit of a connector, a little bit of balance. Now, I think Zubimendi has done that role marvellously for Arsenal. I think he's not really been a 6. He's been an all-round central midfielder, and with Rice and whoever, they've been alternating positions, sometimes both of them bombing on up the pitch, like I mentioned against Spurs. But I think there is room for someone who, if we stop looking at our midfield as basically a 6, an 8 and a 10, and we look at it as 2 central midfielders with a second striker floating, then suddenly that Rodrigo Mendoza deal starts to make a lot more sense. Because at 6 foot, he's actually, with his guile and quality on the ball, because if you haven't seen him play, he's a very glidey, guiley, flary type central midfielder, it looks anyway. He's that typical Spanish, really good on the ball, can sort of, like I said, glide through the pitch. Lovely kind of drop of the shoulder, lovely weighted pass, can dribble, can carry, can do things quite effortlessly from central midfield, but has a little bit of height about him, has played as a defensive midfielder, typically plays central midfielder, can play up the pitch too. At 6 foot, he might be a really nice complement at times to a Zubimendi, or a really nice complement to a Declan Rice, or a Mikel Merino. In fact, he seems a profile who actually can supplement almost any midfield combination that we've got at the moment by dropping him in it as well. I'd add to that how many players do we have? Like I said, Zubimendi's played that role a little bit, who can do that. When you look at let's call them the 6s and the 8s in the squad, Zubimendi, Norgard, Rice, Marino. Now again, Rice and Marino, for me, are much better technically than they're given credit for. And Norgard, of course, is quite good on the ball. You have to be to play in this Arsenal team. You have to have something in possession. But I'd argue that Zubimendi is the only one of that quartet I've mentioned who's known as a ball player, like a real proper give me the ball and I can make things happen. Now, I think Declan Rice, Mikel Merino, I think they can do more of that than they're given credit for. But they're given a lot of credit for their physicality, for their ability to run all over other midfields, for giving us height and presence, for being really good sitting in front of the back four. But what if we want a little bit more in terms of, like I said, that word guile? And I use it a lot recently. But I think it's because there's something about when the game gets tight and there's 2-3 players in front of you, being able to just dance through a couple players. I think Zubimendi did that well against Tottenham. Eze obviously did it well for the goal. But again, with Eze and Ødegaard, they're typically operating higher up the pitch, receiving in the pockets. Ødegaard less so than Eze. But Mendoza seems like a good combination to almost any other of the midfield partnerships you want to put with him, including Eze and Ødegaard. And maybe Arteta gave us a look at that when against West Ham you played Eze and Ødegaard in front of Zubimendi. Maybe he was saying, in front of Declan Rice. Maybe he's saying, I'm happy to play with 2 more advanced 8s and a Declan Rice sitting as well in the future. And maybe players like Rodrigo Mendoza can complement that further. So, a recap on the player really quickly. He's played 10 games for Elche this season. Looks like most of his appearances are 21 of them coming in central midfield. I don't know why it says he's played 21 times when he's only played 10 games in central midfield, but that's what Transfermarkt is saying. So maybe that includes Spain under 21s, because he has played 4 times for them. Maybe includes some La Liga 2 games, I don't know. But according to Transfermarkt, he's played much more of his football as a central midfielder. 11 times an attacking midfielder, once as a defensive midfielder. He's 20 years old, he's 6 foot, release clause of 20 million euros. I don't know. This just screams to me a player like Sven Ipan, who is the Toni Kroos type central midfielder, the Luka Modric type central midfielder. You get the type I'm talking. And I would argue that Zubimendi has been more of that than we expect, but is known more as a 6. And Ødegaard has been a little bit more of that than we expect, but he's more a 10. And Mendoza could be that all-round 8 that gives us something different in central midfield, away from the typically more physical players we've got, but still has that height and presence, and could give us something different profile-wise in that area too. It's just a theory. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, I'm not really well researched on the player at all. I hadn't heard of him until 12 hours ago. I watched some videos, I learned, and I'll go, okay, this is interesting, because at a very, very surface level watch, there's a player there that I could see immediately fitting into a whole multitude of combinations in our midfield. And if Rohan, shout out Rohan on the Cannon podcast, is right about what he's been saying on the Cannon rewatches, Arsenal are moving towards a PSG style midfield where Ruiz, Vitinha, Neves, whoever it is, can all alternate positions and all operate and can in every single area, every facet of play for the team. And he feels like someone, again, at a glance, who might be able to do that. But if you know more about the player, please tell me in the comments section below. I want to learn more about him. But that is just why at surface level, I think Arsenal are trying to sign him. Opportunity potentially in the market, but also a really good complement. And funnily enough, a different profile to the plethora of midfielders we have already. And I include one area in that, by the way. I should have mentioned him. I include one area in that too. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this quick update on the player and on the latest transfer news. Obviously, we play Bayern tonight, so my match reaction will be out a little later tonight. I will be on the Goal Show on TalkSport, so apologies if that comes out a little bit later. But I'll do that, and there will be a player ratings live stream on the Goonerverse as well. Big thank you for tuning in. Subscribe if you haven't to the Goonerverse, obviously, and to Goonerverse News for all the latest Arsenal news, and I'll catch you in a bit.